Greetings and salutations, Sam here, and today we're going to go over some stuff with EDM music, electronic dance music, and today we're going to work inside the electronic body music library. Inside the library, we're going to go to All, and then Song Kit, and then there it is, electronic body music. So I'll undock here, and as you can see, it's not a whole lot of stuff in here, but plenty of wonderful loops and stuff to get started and to make a track with. So there was everything that I needed to just jump right in and start making music. So to start with, real basic. I don't try to get too crazy when I'm writing music, and I like to follow, some standard things that have, been in songwriting for a long time now. So I'll do stuff like an intro, verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. I pick my structures and then I stick to it. And on top of picking those structures, I also try to work within timelines and other things for the beats and the measures so that, it does make sense and it's not completely just absolutely crazy. So I'll do a lot of groupings where you can see that, a lot of these loops are in, 4/4, so, they're basic progressions, and then I'll usually double them or whatever it takes to then make that particular part. But I try to keep this stuff pretty simple and pretty in the realm of what other people are doing, and we don't want to lose the audience, so we play within some of the guidelines. All right, so we can also see that, I'm doing my other thing that I like to do, which is I like to work with the submix tracks or bus tracks. That's how I think of a submix is like a bus on the mixing board. And so I can then control, once I get all of my tracks done and set up, I have one fader that controls all of my drums. That way, when I have everything reduced down, I'm only dealing with 3 faders when I'm getting towards the end of the song. For me, I really like that ease of organization. But, for the moment, I'm starting with the drums, and with Mixcraft 10, we've had some wonderful upgrades, and that's some of the stuff that I really wanted to go over with you guys today, and bring you into this change up and additional tools that they've given us to make this job fun. It's what I've always appreciated about Mixcraft is, for me, I'm coming from this from an artistic standpoint, and so for me it works as an artist. I can get things done, and I don't have to be a rocket scientist. All right, so here's some fun stuff. I have a particular way that I like to organize my mixer. And so if I bring up the little tool thing here for my preferences, how I have mine set up and how I'm using it. So for me, I like having these icons at the bottom for quick identification. This is something I've gotten into, in the last couple of years. It was actually brought up from one of our watchers, and it was a great comment, and it got me thinking of, oh wow, yeah, I'm a fairly visual person, and I bet, in addition to color, this would be something that would help me stay organized. All right, so enough about that fun stuff. All right, my mix panel preferences. Okay, so I've got my track icon. Here are my sends, and so let me get out of this and add one real quick, because that's one of the first things that I want to do. So at the bottom here, insert, send track. Oh, put it up at top. I'm gonna bring it here and put it right below my drums, because I know that this is going to be for my drums. And I already know what I want to use here. And this is a wonderful thing that has been provided native inside Mixcraft. And it's actually a really powerful tool that was used in electronic dance music since day one. This is based off of the Roland 201 tape echo. This thing has been around since 1974. And really has been the backbone of dance music, starting all the way back in the days of disco and, all the way up until now. And it has just wonderful tools that do the job. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that we have this inside of Mixcraft native. I didn't have to, purchase any additional stuff. They provided it. All I had to do was go to the Cherry Audio and fill out the stuff, and then there it was inside my VSTs, ready to use. And I've played around with this one quite a bit, and I've already found the one that I like the most. I've learned how to simulate this with other plugins, that this was right inside of Mixcraft. I was just absolutely so pleased. And so under the presets and under beats, we've got Ghost Snare, and this is the one that does it. And solo the exact spot that I'm talking about. And then here is my send track. Oh, and then here's the other fun part. So if we then, all right, we know where this is what we're using. Now we can see my send knob. And so now I have the ability to bring this in. And so there it is, tape echo. Get this tape echo under control. So we can see right from the beginning that it is bringing in a doubling effect, and then it's on almost like an infinite loop for this tape echo effect, which is what I really like about it. Now, you could put it on the bus effects here, or we could even put it on the individual track. The reason that I like to use it on a send track and to be able to control my effects this way is that I want to go in and I'm going to hand draw my automation points for this effect so that it's only going to go in the places that I want it. Loop the drum beat. I like this preset, but I want a little bit more out of it. I want to get this just right so it really helps bring some excitement in here. Oh, that is just a great effect, and that really brings in that excitement that I was looking for. And that little bit of modulation, I feel, really helped. It brought out just that little whoa, 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 whoa. It added just that little bit of extra effect for me that felt like, it helped with that forward movement. And again, that's what I was looking for with this effect, is I wanted that doubling effect or almost quadrupling effect that it brought out of the high mids there, which felt like the snare, which is why, Ghost Snare, appropriately named. And then it added, its own flavor of like a digital delay. And so it copied it and then looped it. And so it's playing it back several times in a row. And so then adding the modulation on there, yeah, I really like how that worked. Okay, so now that we have the effect all set up, and so now I can get rid of my loop effect. Okay, but now, I can see, okay, I really like, how that sounds, but I don't want it everywhere in the song. I think I really like it with the drum beat too, and then I think I'm also going to use it on the chorus out. Then if I'm looking at my send track, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here, just for dramatic effect. And when I'm adding my edit points like this for volume automation on an effect send track, I'm usually going to use 3 placement points here. And this is so that I will have ultimate control when I go to do raise and lower it, because we've created an anchor spot to be able to do that. And so I will make sure that I have those points in my areas that I'm going to be editing. And then again, one more time here at the chorus outro. I know that I want the effect going in the beginning, but I also could tell that it takes a moment for this effect to take hold. And since that's going to take a moment, I don't want the audience to have to, hear that strangeness in the beginning. So I think that if I bring the volume all the way down and then kind of give myself a little bit of a curve there so it comes in, kind of like a ramp effect. And then here where I want it to completely cut out, I realize that, I want it to completely cut out. And so if I take my edits here, I can have that edit on the same line. It is taken out. It is X'd out and it does not come through. And so same thing over here. And then even though we've gotten rid of the volume, the effect is still going. So when it does come in on this part in the bridge, it's already going to be in full effect, and we won't have that slow stutter effect if we just had it start on this cold. All right. And then I also know that we're going to take it out of this particular verse. And so then I will zoom in and then make the appropriate movements. Okay, so let's check out the beginning here real quick. All right, that works great. Okay, so I'm going to check this spot, make sure that it cuts out completely at that particular point that I need it to. All right, we got the exact effect we were looking for that. All right, well, now I know I can have that going, and that did the fun stuff I needed it to. And then that allows us to move on to some of the other fun stuff. So, for the most part, I think I'm just going to, stick to some useful stuff. So, I wanted to share the tape echo. I thought this was just a wonderful thing that's right inside of Mixcraft. One of the other ones that I wanted to bring attention to is the Xbase 4000. This is a sub enhancer. It's really cool. I love what it does to just bring out a little more of an exaggerated, or not exaggerated, but it pulls out some of the undertones of the root note, but it brings them out an octave lower, and then we can play with it a little bit to even get more out of it. And it's got some great presets, obviously, and, it's got a very specific job. It enhances, either the bass line or the kick drum. And so in this instance, I'm going to start with just the preset of the kick drum and see where we go from there. Oh yeah, I really like the G Sonic. Okay, so with the frequency, it looks like we're getting the fundamental, and so I just had to sweep around until I found it. For me, it was this area right in here. So I'm probably guessing it's, between, 50 and 80 hertz, right around here for that nice kick tone. Then, a Q form on that EQ. So, you can have a nice sharp or wide. Often on these, I'll kind of go in between, because I want it to be right around the fundamental of my kick, which is usually around 60, but then have it curve off towards 45 and then curve off upwards towards 80. And so I got that nice, it's not a super wide bell curve, but I like a little bit of width there with those frequencies. So we're catching some of the other ones around it. And then with the enhancer, I just brought it up until it sounded good. Same with the saturation. And then once I found the saturation level I liked, then I played around with the volume. And then there was the full volume on it as well. And so then, you could hear the difference between just turning it, on and off. And so then, once everything else is in the mix, you could then go back and play with the volume to bring in as you need it for a flavor. And since it seems to be I'm taking more of a bus mix approach to this, so let me go grab an EQ. I like the TB parametric EQ when I'm using native stuff, and then I'll use a left and right sum so that it gives me spectral view. Well, that's really cool to be able to see where the stuff is. And so, we've got the frequencies down here, and then, we've got 6 bands to play with. And so, with drums, like I said, I'll come in and start rolling off anywhere between, 40 and, 30. It all depends. I want things to start to, come down in volume after my fundamental for the kick drum is basically what I'm going for. And so I'll bring then my second one down, and I know my kick drum's right around 60. And so then I'm going to bring that one up just a few decibels because I know that that's where I want my main point. Then with my third curve for EQ here, I'm gonna kind of comb filter out. So I'm gonna notch out a little area for the bass right around 120. Again, we can go in and adjust the Q, because I just want to target that one area. And so, adjusting this allows me to not affect those other frequencies that are right next to me. And then again, we don't have to adjust it a ton, but enough to do the job. All right. Then with the next band, we also know that, right around 500, we bring out some of the mud of those mid build-up frequencies for the drum set. I know between 6 and 7 is where I like to bring up some of the sparklies. And then depending on what's going on with the snare, that can be anywhere from, 1K to 2K to 2.5 to 3. Really depends on what the focal point is in here. So a lot of times I'll just play it safe and do just a real gentle move. And then that should actually be pretty nice. All right, I was pretty close on what I thought was going on there. I like that. That was cool. So I like the sound of the drums. I like the effect we pulled off there. And I think that's very fitting to a, modern electronic dance track. All right, so moving on. Bring in the bass tracks now. See what kind of fun stuff we got going on there. So I think we're going to approach this in a very similar manner. We're going to bring in the X bass. We found the fundamental, and it was just right above the kick drum, as I was suspecting that it would be, where we notched out a little bit of room for it there, so that was really nice. And then, we kept the Q, right pretty close where, we dialed in the Q, enhanced it, brought in the saturation, played with that volume a little bit, and then played with the main volume, back and forth. And again, we'll dial this to taste, once we get a little further along in the mix. But already, I'm really happy with this. Okay, so then, just so that we're being respectful to the other tracks, let's bring in our equalizer. And again, I want to be able to see what I'm doing. And so since we know we want to stay away from the kick, that's where we want things to start rolling off quite a bit. So, we know that we want that volume. We don't want to fight with the kick drum. We want to allow that to come through nice and solid, of course. And so, now we've got the band here. And so we know that right around 112 to 150, that's pretty much where our bass lines are living. And so I'm going to enhance that by just a wee bit. And so then I'm going to be thinking about synth lines or vocal lines, other things that would live in these frequencies I'm thinking of. I primarily think of it from a guitar's perspective though. So this is where I would normally carve out just a little bit for this, and then I'll adjust that Q factor again. I don't want to remove a whole lot, just enough to make room. I want there to be a solid bass line, but I also want to keep those mids and mid highs. I want to keep a lot of that room open for other instruments. Then usually somewhere around 2 or 3 is where I'll put a little boost for where the top end of the fundamental will be coming through, and then usually I'll start around 8 for my cutting or high pass. And then, what I'm looking to do is to bring it back, because I'm not going to really need much above 4K from the bass. Since I know that, we'll adjust for that now. But then what I will do is I'll come back to this other frequency in the 2K, and then I'll adjust the Q on that one so that I've got just a little bit more control over that as well. All right, so let's see how this sits with the bass. I like how that's sitting together. And I'm trying to think, is there anything else fun we could do with the bass right away? Oh, I know. Alright, so this is a fun one that I picked up over the years. So my bass rig for a long time was the Hartkey LH1000 rig, and I swapped out the tubes right away for the preamp tube to be the 12AX7s. And this got me the tone that I'd been looking for. And so for me, that became part of bass and bass tone and how I approach it. Well, and sometimes it doesn't work. Not the sound I was looking for. I think I'm thinking of more of a regular bass, like a bass guitar. Okay, so let's approach this from another direction then. All right, I got some things moved around and found out where to bring out some of that that mid-range that was actually it was pulling out some of the mid-range, and it cleaned it right up. That was nice. Well, I'm happy with that. Now to move on to those synths, bring these synths in here. Well, what do you know? Well, for me, I think that was a great start and a great, jump into electronic dance music and going over some of the fun stuff just native right inside Mixcraft. I think I'm going to approach these, from all different types of directions and, try to come up with as many tips and tricks for you guys as possible that I can come up with. Well, I really like how this turned out, and, hopefully you guys got some tips and tricks out of this, and, we'll see you in the next one.